Live broadcast happening now. There we go. We got it. All right. Let's see. All right, we have some folks who are probably wondering what the heck is going on. So should we just kind of get into it? Yes. Okay. All right. Well, folks, we are having some technical difficulties, but we're going to move right in. My name is Kevin Osfalmers. You are at the roundtable for parenting as adoptees, and we are trying to get other folks on, but again, tech issues. But regardless, we'll kind of go into introductions. We have a lot of stuff to cover. Again, my name is Kevin. I'm one of the co-editors of Parenting as Adoptees, and I'm also the founder of Land of Gazillion Adoptees. And at this point, I'll just hand things off to other folks, starting with Adam.
Hi, my name is Adam Chow. I'm one of the co-editors and co-publishers of the book. Ron, maybe do you want to start with you to introduce?
Sure. Hi, I'm Ron Kim, and I don't know what you wanted me to say. I'm one of the authors.
All right, moving on.
Hey, this is Trippa, and I'm also one of the authors, and joining me tonight is my daughter, Courtney. Hi.
Hello.
I'm Susan, and I'm one of the authors too. Hi.
Hi, Mark Hagland here. Can you hear me? I'm also one of the authors. Welcome.
All right, well, let's just kind of go into the questions. So I know most of the folks who are going to be joining us here, they have read the book, so they're quite familiar. But the first question I actually want to throw out to everyone is, what was it like writing your chapters? And it's a three-part question. What was it like writing your chapters? What was the most challenging, and what was the most rewarding? Can we start with Susan?
What was it like? I told you it was soul-wrenching, and the most challenging was having to splice my story in with some theoretical background, and I had to be really honest, and that was scary to put some of my personal life out there.
And what was one of the most rewarding?
Having such a positive response. I've received so many people telling me how much they could relate to what I wrote, and rewarding that I was able to talk about it with my son and with some really good friends, and just be able to get that out there, and it felt really good.
Great. How about you, Mark?
Well, I think it wasn't difficult writing because I'm a professional writer, but I think the challenging thing was trying to find a message. I think we all have so much to offer. I mean, I was thrilled when I read the book. But trying to find the language and the message, because I think that what we can offer is a special array of messages, but figuring out exactly what to say, particularly I think to adoptive parents, I kind of puzzled over that for a while. I actually started my chapter a few different times and realized that I needed to redo it. What was rewarding was being a part of this group, because I think the book is really amazing, and everybody, I mean, everybody in the book, and certainly everybody here included, wrote from the heart and also from the spirit, and they really gave so much to it. And I can't imagine anyone reading this book and not just being moved, but also I can't imagine anyone not really being reflective or being moved to reflection about it, because we all have such amazing perspectives, I think. So that was what was rewarding.
Great. How about you, Jiran? What was challenging and rewarding, and what was the process like?
Well, I kind of had the idea of what I wanted to write about for a long time. I think I had kind of bits and pieces of it in my mind, even ever since I was still doing my blog. So it was kind of a nice opportunity to put it all together, rather than just in the bits and pieces that I'd done before. I think the most challenging part, I think as an adoptee always, is trying to decide how much personal information to put out there. And also knowing that because I was writing about being a parent, that it was necessarily going to involve my children and my own parents, because so much of how I am as a parent is situated within, both those other two generations. And so it's really not just my story, it's also both of their stories. And I want to be very cognizant of what I write about both of them. And that I think is always challenging because it's, people are going to be judging both my parents and my children kind of based on what I write about them. And so I wanted to make sure that I was doing justice by them, even though sometimes it was really honest and maybe painful to read. But I think the most rewarding part also, especially with my kids, was as I was writing it, they're old enough, they're high school and college age now. So I was able to talk a lot about what I was going to be writing about with them and was able to get their input on what I was writing and their feedback along the process. So that was really rewarding for me.
Great. And Courtney and Kripa, could you come to the computer a little bit more because we couldn't hear you when you were introducing the challenging and what was rewarding for you, and you two had a very interesting chapter because you wrote it together.
Yeah, and that was actually probably the most rewarding part of working on this chapter was when I thought about writing, I thought about, encouraging my daughter to join in and share. Actually, what sparked it was that I remembered that she had written a piece in high school after returning from India, and I thought it would be really interesting to have more in-depth conversation about what that experience was like and her own identity. And so actually, for me, the most rewarding part was having those conversations. We actually kind of interviewed each other to get some of the information that then we wrote from later to write the chapter. And the most challenging, I think, what was the most challenging?
For me, the most challenging thing was combining our ideas. We had a lot of ideas and very different writing styles, so just combining it all, that was a little bit challenging, but once we made over that obstacle, that was good, I think.
Great, great. Courtney, what was the rewarding part? I mean, it's an obvious question, but you have a very interesting part in of itself. It's written incredibly well, and you're clearly speaking from the heart, but you're speaking from a different place than your mother was. What was the process like?
It was different. I think the most rewarding part of the process, like my mother said, was the actual just sitting down interviewing my mother. I've known her for 19 years and so like just sitting there, we never really talked about it as in depth as we did when we interviewed each other. So definitely interesting to learn that much more about my mother, about somebody I've known for so long.
We kind of started from the beginning and then for the purpose of the chapter really honed in. But we talked about, different experiences that she had that I remembered around race and growing up and identity. And then she would share things that I had forgotten. And so we kind of had this dialogue back and forth that we recorded and then later we try to weave it together.
Great, great. Adam, do you want to ask the next question?
Sure. Outside of the book, what advice would you give to other writers and other adoptees as they may write maybe chapters for an anthology, a book, or maybe just blog pieces as well? And so maybe I'll direct that question first to J-Ron.
Oh my goodness, advice. I think it's really easy to get caught up in writing a lot of personal narrative, and you forget that there's lots of people that are reading it. I think blogging is really incredibly rewarding, but it's really difficult because people make a lot of assumptions about who you are based on a few things that you write. So it's difficult. I think you have to know who your audience is going to be and let that guide you. With my blog, I know I had a lot of adoptive parents and a lot of agency workers and other people reading it, but from the very beginning, it was always my goal that I was talking to other adoptees. They were who I imagined to be my primary readers. So I think just trying to figure out who your audience is and speak to them. I guess that would be my advice.
In Mark, how about you?
Well, and I think some of this comes out of my background as a writer, if I may say. I would like to play off what Ron just said, which is you do have to think about your audience. And I always think about multiple audiences. I mean, I think it would be sad if only one group read something that any of us wrote. So in the adoption world, you're writing for adoptive parents, adult adoptees, young adult and teen adoptees, um, possibly birth parents, relatives of adoptees and adoptive parents, uh, adoption professionals. So you have to think about the fact that when what I loved what Ron just said about narrative, because this is intensely personal, and as you know, I participate in the conference every year, and I basically tell people it's like being stripped naked in front of gigantic rooms of people. But you find ways to communicate your experience that can bridge things, and that's so rewarding. But you do have to think about your audiences, plural, in order to be successful, because it's nice to write for yourself, and you also have to write for yourself, but you can't forget that you're going to send this out online or in print or whatever to other people who are coming from very different sets of experiences.
Okay. Susan, how about you in the sense of your chapter talking about your family? Like, what would you say to other writers who maybe want to talk about something so personal?
Well, like I said, it was a very big challenge because I'm not only talking about my family and everything that Ron said would apply. It's about my son's story. It's about my parents' story. It was also, I'm a therapist, so I knew that potentially clients would be reading this. So I would recommend to other people. Sorry about that. That they really run it by trusted friends and really think about, are you going to be okay with this in 5 years and 10 years, and really what that story means to you. And it was important enough for me to, because I felt it would really resonate with a lot of people.
Hey, Courtney and Kripa, maybe the same question directed to you.
I know. I think for me, kind of what the other authors have said, it was really important to think about the audience. I wasn't quite sure who would read this anthology. I knew adoptees would, but I also knew that it would probably go into the professional community. And I guess I wanted to write not only for my own healing, because writing for me is a healing process, but also wanted to write in a way that maybe would help others, with their own pain or sorrow or loss that they've experienced. So in helping them as well with kind of thinking through some of the healing that they've maybe gone through.
I agree, and I also think that the writing puts it out there that you're not the only one that's feeling this way or the only one that's going through these feelings, and it shows other people that you're not alone, other adoptees or other adoptee parents or children, that you're not alone. There are other people that are experiencing the same things you are.
Okay, great. Kevin, do you want to answer or ask the next question?
Yeah, sure. One of the biggest surprises that we ran through the book, and I think it's partly because Adam and I had read this book so many times during the collection and the editing process, is that folks were like, we can't read this book from the beginning to the end. It's just, each chapter is compact full of stuff. So one of the questions that I would like to ask, because obviously there's so much happening in each chapter, is for all of you, from your perspective, what are the biggest takeaways for you individually? So I would like to start that with Susan.
Can you hear me? My microphone was off there for a minute. The biggest takeaways were that we all had so many threads that were in common, even though we wrote about such different topics. And that was really comforting to know and to read and to hear about other people's experiences. And it's also another example of not everybody has the same perspective, and we all come from different places. So I thought that was what made the book so valuable.
Hey, how about you, Mark?
I love that you said that people found the book so intense that they couldn't read the whole thing at once. We're like a flourless chocolate cake. Um, you can only have a few bites at a time. Um, and it's a good thing, right? Especially since I'm thinking about dessert, but be that as it may. I think that what was fascinating for me, I agree completely with what Susan said, and I would just amplify. Um, we're all on this journey, and everybody had such different, uh, it's like taking one big vase and kind of shattering it into pieces, and each of us took a piece and looked at it. Like Kripa and Courtney talked about going to the birth country, going to India, and Susan talked about how her experience affected her relationships and her how her identity journey affected her long-term relationships. Um, and Jaron reflected on both, as she just said now too, both parents and children. Her parents, herself as a parent, her children. So each of us took different elements and found something really rich in it. So, as you delved into this book, each chapter, it was like, those kaleidoscope things that children have, that are like 4 inches long, and you twist them and you look through the little thing, and suddenly it's a different view. And I love that aspect of it, because whenever you get any group of people together, even those who have a lot in common, which we all do, you're going to get quite different perspectives on some of those experiences. So you got a whole kaleidoscope of different perceptions of birth search, birth country visit, racial and ethnic identity, relationship building, what it meant to have children, how you raise your children, racial consciousness, all those things. Fascinating stuff.
Great. Kripa and Courtney.
One of the things I loved about this book, I think it was the brilliance behind the editing, is that I felt every chapter kind of built on the next, and it almost linked, and it was amazing how there was a theme that started in one chapter and then seemed to pick up in the next. And I also felt that the power in this book was that there was something for you. There was a message for you, regardless of who wrote the chapter and what their story was. I walked away with every chapter learning something differently about my own journey, as well as learning something about the authors. And so for me, that made this anthology particularly powerful.
And another important thing about the differences in the writing styles and the chapters was that, like, more than just one person can learn from each chapter. You can learn something from all of the chapters. So I thought that was really important.
Great. G-Run.
I think one of the things that I really appreciated the most about this book and the real diversity of experiences that were shared in the different chapters. One of the things that I talk a lot about is that adoption is always focused on children, but obviously we grow up and we have children, and Sandy's trying to get on the Hangout here. I can see her icon, but she's not getting through. We're texting, but Sandy is a grandmother, and so just thinking about we have we live with this experience our whole lives, and yet so much of what's out there is really about us only up till we get to about 18 years old. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to see all of our experiences, and we're all very different people and different types of parents and grandparents, but it's exciting to be able to see kind of both the universal themes that we all kind of think about as adoptees who are parents, and also the real great diversity among us and our experiences too.
And if I may just say, I think that's one of the reasons why the book is so impactful because it speaks to adult adoptees, young adoptees, and adoptive parents and families. I think everyone can learn from it. And you all, I mean, we all had such everyone here tonight, I was very touched by each of your contributions. And each of your chapters gave me moments of real reflection. I was amazed. I thought I knew you guys. Who knew?
Adam, do you want to take the next question?
I do. So, when you wrote your chapters, is there something maybe new that you learned about yourself? And I think I'll maybe direct the question to Susan first.
Sorry, she wants everybody to look at her pretty princess music box.
Can we see her?
There's her pretty princess music box.
It's very nice, Aunt Helena.
Beautiful. I like it.
It's a challenge. All the time when we're past bedtime here.
Right. It just got real parenting.
That's
right now.
right.
Yeah, exactly.
What did I learn about myself the most? I learned that it was okay to share my story. I learned that it was okay to continuously be grieving some of the things I was grieving, and that I didn't have to be completely detached and clinical all the time. So that was very eye-opening for me. It was very empowering.
Okay. Maybe Mark?
Oh. I think it just added another step to my journey because one of the things that I've been really trying to do, this is part of my sense of mission of putting myself out there, is I like to call it transmogrify, but transform my personal experiences into something bigger and higher that help people. So when I know Kevin liked my phrase, the non-checklist list, but my whole point in devising that was a lot of transracially adoptive parents, I have tremendous empathy for them, and they're trying to do something that is inherently, in certain ways, challenging. Because unless they were transracial adoptees themselves, they don't actually know what that experience is. So I think the interesting part for me, I don't know if it was surprising, but it certainly made me reflective. What do you say to people who you want to reach out to and you want to give them enough of your experience so that it will impact them, but you also don't want to frighten them or freak them out? We had a situation at our annual conference around Korean adoption where we were talking about issues around constantly being looked at, and how I said that I ended up developing this lifelong complex, and one of the adoptive parents burst into tears, and I felt so terrible because I said, well, don't feel bad. And she was at the very far end of this room, so I couldn't like pat her on the shoulder or anything. But I said, I'm sharing this experience so that you can know what's happening to your child, not so that you will be frightened or freaked out or despondent by it. So I think what I'm continuing to learn is how to express from my own experience whatever little bits of wisdom I have gleaned to other audiences or other people in ways that they can hear and that are useful.
Okay. Jay or Ron, how about you when you kind of finally put all these bits and pieces together? Was there anything kind of new maybe that you learned about yourself or about the way you might have handled things as a parent?
I think there's always that sense of I wish I had done things better or differently. I think that's just part of being a parent. I think one of the things that I I got a little bit more of was empathy for my own parent situation. And I think that it's really difficult when you're writing about it. My parents, I say that they did the best that they could because they did what they were told to do, and at the time they were told to follow this kind of colorblind idea that race doesn't matter, and if they just raised me like one of their own. I think in my younger years there was a lot of um, I had a lot of negative feelings about that, feeling like it was a real disservice when I went out into the world and didn't have a sense of who I was as a Korean American person. Um, and now, after having spent a lot of time in the field of social work and working with a lot of adoption agencies and workers and adoptive parents, it's just that's a real struggle. I think that agencies and social workers still today aren't doing enough to really have those discussions with adoptive parents. I think adoptive parents are doing the best that they can with what most of them anyway, with what they are told and what they know how to do, and they haven't had our experiences, so they don't know. And so I think in some ways, I think writing this chapter gave me more empathy for how my parents now they're in their mid 60s, and they've told me I wish I'd known better. I wish I'd known differently. And part of that comes out of these conversations that we can have now that I'm a parent and I'm sharing my strategies for how I want my children to have that kind of value of social justice and all the things that I didn't have that I'm trying to teach my kids and modeling for them. My parents didn't know how. No one had ever brought that up to them as being important. So I don't blame the parents as much as I really want to be on those social workers who aren't doing a good job or a good enough job, really having those frank discussions. So in some ways, it gave me a little bit more puss and vinegar too, to be like, all right, I'm not letting you guys off the hook. You have to do a better job.
Yeah, really. Courtney and Crippa, so for you two, as maybe both individuals and as mother and daughter.
I know personally, just writing, I learned a lot about how my mother's adoption actually impacted me. I never thought about it before, and I realized why I clung to certain things that I clung to, like certain cultures and languages, and I've never thought about that before until after I sat down and written this piece.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really was the most rewarding piece of it in understanding myself was seeing that multi-generational kind of link through adoption, um, and that what I thought would be my greatest losses and some of my greatest kind of sadness around adoption. Courtney experienced that, but in a different way and maybe not as deep. And so it was good for me to also see that sometimes what we may pass on or not pass on, our children have agency around what they take and how they move forward. And so for me, that was really healing to see that some of my own challenges, something she's been able to let go of, and then there's others that she's working on in her own way, but differently, but maybe not quite as deep. And so I saw that adoption thread through her journey.
Great. Kevin, do you want to ask the next question?
Yeah, sure. Do any of you have your any copy of the book in front of you? Any of you? Would any of you like to read a portion of your chapters and kind of talk about why you're reading that portion and what's to take away from it? Let's start with Mark. Do you have it in front of you or no?
Uh, it's on this computer.
Oh, okay. Let's
Give
start
it to
with
somebody else and let me see if I can figure this out, okay?
Kripa, can we start with you?
Sure. Courtney just stepped out, but I'll read a piece from my part. And we kind of wrote it that it would be parallel, that we would, each talk about a similar kind of experience. But in South Carolina, I'm often asked about my children's multi-ethnic background and our family history. Most days, I don't mind explaining, but on some days, my soul is too tired to answer as the weight falls upon me yet again, of having to explain to strangers why my children's genetic histories are broken. In these often unexpected moments when my voice struggles to find an answer, I am reminded of the depth to which, for some adoptees, knowing as much as we can about our beginnings truly matters. It matters not only to fill in the gaps of our own personal journeys, but also to be able to fill in the gaps for our children. And I like that piece because I felt like this piece also illustrated what ways I try to fill in the gaps for my daughter. But then my daughter, in hearing her voice, in her writing, talked about how she then for herself and found some answers.
Great, great. Susan, do you have it in front of you?
Like Mark, it's on my computer.
Oh, okay, that's all right. How about we move to J-Ron quick?
Okay. All right. Okay. I grew up the eldest of three children in a middle-class suburban family. My parents met as young teenagers and have been married over 45 years. In the summers, my siblings and I rode our bikes to Lake Minnetonka and the local dairy for cheese sticks and ice cream. My mom volunteered at our schools and church, and my dad owned a small business in town. It was an idyllic childhood in every way, but one. I was an Asian child plopped into a white family in a white town, attended white schools, and worshiped in white churches. To my knowledge, there is only one Korean American family in my school district and a very small handful of African American families. Although we lived only 20 miles from the city, my daily interactions with anyone other than white Americans had become non existent. Although my parents chose to adopt a child that was not racially, ethnically, or culturally similar to themselves, they did not choose to live, work, or socialize with people of color. Instead of embracing and recognizing our diverse family, my parents tried to minimize our differences that made me stand out as different. My parents did the adopting, but I did the adapting.
So, could you talk about that section a little bit?
Um, when we talk about the concept of adoption, so often, the word adoption really is all about, the root of the word is to choose, and so we're talking about parents that are choosing to bring these children into their families, and it seems like it's always about how well do the children adapt to their parents' culture. We're not really looking at how much are the parents adapting to having this child into their home. And so that was what I was trying to get to. We talk about it as adopting, but I see it as more adapting, and it's the child has to adapt to the adoptive parents and the adoptive family's home. And I don't see sometimes a lot of adapting in the other direction.
Mark, did you figure out your computer?
No.
Oh, okay, that's fine. We'll skip. Courtney, is there one section that you wanted to read?
Yeah. Um,
Oh, Courtney?
well, I may not
Courtney?
be able to. Can y'all hear me?
Hey, Courtney, could you try it again? You and Kripa are breaking out.
All right. Can y'all hear me?
It's better.
Yes.
Okay. While I may not be able to change what I know about my missing past, I can choose in what ways my past changes me. When I started high school, I decided I wanted a tattoo, but never knew what to get. After we returned from our family trip to India, I finally knew what I wanted. On my 18th birthday, with my mother's blessing, I got my first tattoo. I chose to have in the passage the what's actually tattooed on me, which means beautiful, to be tattooed in Hindi on my back left shoulder. Um, I chose this passage because after going to India, I got a new connection to my Indian heritage I learned a lot about my mother and myself while we were on that trip. And I just knew that I was Indian and I was still beautiful, even if I felt the connection as white, it was still needed to have.
I know you said something really awesome there, and you broke up for like 30 seconds. Could you try to say that one more time? Sorry.
Um, did we catch all of the passage?
Yes, yes, but we just didn't catch the last 30 seconds or so.
Okay. Um, I after coming back from India, I got like a new connection with my Indian heritage. So it helped a lot just to have gone to India, and I learned a lot about myself and my mother. And though I didn't have the connection that was super strong, it was something that I needed. So I felt that getting the tattoo like indefinitely um, bonded me with that heritage.
Very cool, very cool. All right, Adam.
I think the last question that I have is a little bit maybe outside of the book, is just kind of what are you doing now, maybe within the community? So other things that you're writing about, other projects that you're kind of involved with or working on, or maybe what you plan to do for the holidays or something like that. Jay Ron, how about let's start with you?
You want to know what I'm doing for the holidays?
Holidays, other projects,
My biggest project that I'm working on is I'm getting ready for the St. John's conference coming up, and I'm writing a speech called Beyond Adoptee Exceptionalism, and it's a critique of the way that media, research, and adoptive parents and adoption agencies do what I call simultaneously position us as both damaged and exceptional. And then I'm also working on my dissertation, which is looking at conceptualizations of disabilities related to intercountry adoption and intercountry adoptees, and then what that means for their placement stability in their adoptive homes. So those are my two main projects that I'm working on.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about the conference for people who don't know about it?
Sure, and Susan and Kripke can talk about it too because they're on the organizing committee. The St. John's conference is biennial every 2 years. It's one of my favorite conferences because there's a lot of adult adoptees that are on the board and who are presenters and speakers. This year's theme is going to be about race, rescue, and religion and adoption. So it should be very provocative, and there should be a lot of really interesting sessions about that. I'm also going to be on a panel called "The Rescuers Speak Out," so that should be a lot of fireworks, I think.
Susan, do you want to talk a little bit maybe more about the conference as well as some of the other things that you might be up to?
The St. John's Conference, like Jaron said, is every 2 years, and it's in collaboration with Montclair State, and it's been going on since, I believe, the early 2000s, and it's a really unique conference in that it is adoptee-led, but in collaboration with adoptive parents and scholars, and this year's theme is going to be provocative. Hi, Astrid!
Astrid!
Now that we're done, can you hear me?
Yes. Susan, can you continue?
I'm sure, and Astrid's going to be there too. We're talking about the St. John's Conference, so it's a wonderful time because it's showcasing people's research presentations, really provocative panels. There's performance art. All related to adoption and adoptee issues. So I'm looking forward to that, and that is next week. And I'm also working on a paper, a journal article about working with adopted families post-age 18, so kind of young adulthood, regular adulthood.
Okay, great. Courtney and Kripa, can you talk maybe about some of the things that maybe you have going on in the next few months or other projects?
I'm really excited. And I am actually planning to present on my dissertation in New York, and so I'm glad that that big project is behind me. And I've been working on a few articles, hopefully, for publication out of my dissertation. My dissertation focused on the identity journeys of women who were adopted in the United States as well, and between the ages of 25 to 38. So it was a narrative dissertation. I got to listen to 20 amazing stories and then think about some of the themes around identity that emerged. And then I'm busy as ever in the Indian adoptee community. I'm doing a lot of fun things and planning activities, and more news will be forthcoming.
And then Courtney,
I will also be in New York during the same time as the conference, but I guess my main projects right now are focusing on school, staying focused in that area, trying to get a 4.0.
that's great. And so, Mark, and for you, maybe other projects that you're involved in or that you want to
Sure.
talk about?
Sure. I just wanted to be really brief, though, because we should give Astrid time now that she's joined us. But very briefly, I've been blogging for a really interesting online community called thenextfamily.com. And what's interesting is it's every kind of unusual or atypical family, including adoptive families, multiracial families, gay families, LGBT families, single parent families, families by surrogacy. And what I think is fascinating is how we, as adult transracial and transracial international adoptees, are building bridges to all sorts of families. So I want to keep building those bridges with others. But I really think we should give Astrid some time to talk.
Right on. Astrid, do you want to introduce yourself and what you have hooking on your ear? Is that like an old phone?
It's the only way I could figure out how to have to use a microphone is use this silly phone thing. So anyway, I've really enjoyed listening to everyone and spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to make this work. So I will just say I know we're towards the end. And I look forward to another opportunity, but everybody has been amazing. I'm so excited to be a part of this project. And I bow down to every single one of you who are part of this, and you all are amazing. So I'm very honored to be a part of this. Thank you.
We're not going to let you off the hook that quickly. We have 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes. Your chapter was interesting in the writing process because while you're writing and reflecting upon your own personal life, a lot of stuff happened at the same time, right?
Yes, it did.
Could you talk about that?
Sure. So I believe when I was in the middle of writing this, I made a trip down to Colombia and where I was adopted from, and ended up finding my birth mother. And it was interesting because, Kevin, you had asked me specifically if I could write about that and maybe end it with that. And it was so fresh and so new to me. I couldn't find the space or the energy to even have words behind what I was going through. It was all so new. It still is very new. It hasn't even been a year. And so that was just something that I didn't have access to in my personal brain.
Right, but since then you've been able to share some of your story with wider media in the Pacific Northwest, right?
Yes, I have. So I was interviewed by the local newspaper here, the Oregonian, and it was fascinating. It was a 9-hour interview, not all at once, thank goodness. The writer did a two-part piece on my story of finding Carmenza, my birth mother. And I really enjoyed her piece, and she did a great job on being very respectful and so forth. So it has, some parts of it have definitely been shared with the community.
Adam, do you have a question for her?
I think one of the questions that we asked earlier writers was, what was one of maybe the most rewarding parts of writing your part of the book, and then maybe what was one of the hardest things to write about? And if there was one thing maybe you could take away from it, or you wanted other people to take away from it, what would that be?
So I would say the most rewarding piece was actually to have the opportunity to write some things down that I had never written down. I had to have some moment to do some reflection and some writing for actually my daughter. And I think that while I was writing this, I just kept picturing her in my mind of, well, when she reads this, when she's at whatever age as a young adult, and when she's reading this, what will this experience be like to go through and read it? And so having the opportunity to write for that audience was really wonderful. And then also I would say the hardest, most challenging piece was writing that, knowing that my mother, my adoptive mother and my adoptive father would be reading this, and being respectful and being honest. I felt like I owed it to the adoptee community, and I owed it to the adoption professional community and the adoptive parent community, everybody, to be extremely honest, and that was really important. And at the same time, being really respectful to people who were really important to me, that if they read it, they would be able to hopefully grow from it, and also see that this was just my experience, but feel that I wasn't exposing them. And I think several people have written about, or have talked about that in this interview process, is really thinking about the people that were sharing the story. It's not just our story, it's that ripple effect of how many people are really a part of this story. So.
Very cool, very cool. One of the editors, as they say, has left the building, so I'll ask the next question to you. What for you has been the biggest takeaway you think?
Oh. Holy shit! I've been only doing this for 50 minutes.
The first words out of your mouth were "holy shit," and we're totally live.
Ask me if I care. I can't believe what I have done. Anyway. I've been able to hear you. I've just not been able to be part of this yet.
Excellent.
Anyway.
Well, we will get to some of your questions for you, Sandy. Give us a second, but to Oscar,
sure.
In reading the chapters, what were some of the biggest takeaways for you?
I would say the biggest takeaway was recognizing how large my community and what amazing people are in my community. That I'm not alone out there in my experiences. Everything from everybody's chapter spoke to me in some capacity, and how I just really hope that this book, it gets in the hands of lots of people, so they don't have to feel like these experiences, they're alone in that. So I'd say that was the biggest takeaway in reading everybody's amazing chapters and words.
Great. And last question. What are you currently working on besides, you're going to the St. John's conference, right? But beyond that, what else are you up to?
Yes, I'm going to the St. John Conference for the first time ever, and I can't wait to see lots of you there. It's going to be so exciting. I'm the director of an amazing program here in Portland, and the Adoption Mosaic is we provide education and support resources to the adoption community, and we pride ourselves in having an unbiased place to come where people can come and hear about adoption without feeling like they are trying to impress anyone, giving them a space to really get the kind of education that they need to make the best decision for themselves. So that being said, moving on a daily basis, I'm working on making sure we keep our doors open and offering awesome support and resources. I would say my personal journey right now is going through an experience of creating a workshop and talking about what ethical search and reunion looks like, and starting to talk with adoptive parents who are very interested in finding their children's birth family without their children maybe having any control in the situation. So creating a workshop around that is really my passion right now, and getting people to start talking about ethical search and ethical reunions.
Great, great. After making one of the greatest entrances of all time, Sandy is froze up again.
What?
I see her on twice too.
Am I on?
Oh, there she is. Adam, can you ask her some questions?
Hi, Sandy. Are you still there?
I think I am.
Okay. Well, we can at least.
How come I'm a weirdo? How come I'm a weird white person?
Oh.
You look like you're transitioning to the other side.
Oh my God! It happened.
That's all we see of you too.
You're seeing the bright light.
Holy shit! I don't know what happened. I'm on my what you call it here, my little Google, what's this thing called? Galaxy tab. And for some reason, my picture disappeared.
You've been angelized.
I was almost re-traumatized. Oh.
You're a blessed spirit.
Adam, let's regain control of this interview here. Do you have any questions for Sandy?
Sure. I think maybe a few things. If you could, a few of the questions that we've asked all of the writers are, what do you think was one of the most rewarding things about writing the chapter? What is also, do you think, is one of the hardest things about writing that chapter? And then, was there something new that you learned about yourself, either maybe as an individual or as a parent, after putting down all the words?
I think you asked me what is the hard. One of the questions is what is the hardest, and I didn't really have a hard time writing this chapter. I've been writing for quite a bit, so what the most rewarding, I think you asked, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I have never written about being a parent and a grandparent. So that was, I talk about it, but I'd never written it. It's the most rewarding to me, and it has set me on a whole new, I guess, thought stream to write about is, when I close in my chapter, I realized that I had broken a cycle. And I felt like I broke a cycle of abuse and disconnect with my children. And everyone's still healing from my separation. But to be walking with my grandchildren and to know several things. They've never known abuse. They've never been screamed at, yelled at, hit. They've all been to their homelands. They know who their grandparents are and their grandparents. Even if they haven't met them, they know their names. They knew all these things that I have never known as a child. And then to have, I think, because of the song that I made for my granddaughter about where she came from, and then her asking if she can go to that star, and when I said, we can't travel like that, baby, and the older grandson saying, someday we might be able to travel there, it just occurred to me that, you know, I have adult-minded, open, anything can happen mind. And for just that, just when I closed with that, when I wrote it, I realized that the gift I've been given through my grandchildren, and that's amazing.
Can you talk maybe about some of the, or maybe any other projects that you have going on, coming up, or things that you'd like to talk about that you're doing in the community?
Well, we're going to have the Gathering for Our Children and Welcome Home Adoptees powwow on November 3rd. And that's quite remarkable in that adoptees come from around the country. This year there'll be people traveling from Maine, Maryland, Virginia, Ohio, Kansas, Wisconsin, Nebraska, and for the first time, one of my relatives is going to come, one of my sisters, who's never been to Minnesota, and she's going to participate in the ceremony, and a niece that I've never met. So, aside, personally, it's going to be amazing, and then just all the adoptees that are making it for that. And then we're also planning our First Nations Adoptee Summit, Policy Summit for March of 2013.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
The Policy Summit?
Yes.
That is a gathering of tribal leaders, national child welfare leaders, adoptees, and birth relatives. The goal of it has been to, we built on a foundation of testimonies from various adoptees, and then those that have listened to these testimonies, and each had 2 comments, and so each year we plan to add 1 or 2 testimonies to that. And what we want is our stories to impact those who make decisions in the policy area and the education area. So we had tribal judges there, and one of the quite remarkable things that just happened at our last summit was a birth mother told her story, and a tribal judge from Michigan was there, and he said, you know, based on what you told me, I'm going to go back to Chambers, and I'm going to change everything so that it doesn't give the impression. I never want to leave my court the way you felt. So so we have everything from small things like that to judges who are involved in legislation who can really help us with some of our issues in the post-adoption, some of our post-adoption issues.
Okay, great. Kevin, did you have other questions maybe for Sandy or for any of the other writers?
No, we are at this point past the hour mark, and I think we kind of discussed that would be the case. But I just wanted to throw it out there to see if anyone had any last words that they wanted to end with.
Could I just say something? First of all, Sandy, I was very deeply touched by your story. I thought it was totally astonishing. I mean, it really was, totally blew me away. Everyone's blew me away, but yours blew me away plus. So really appreciate your contribution. Just one thing I wanted to say that was so interesting. I learned, I know we all agreed we learned something from everybody's chapter. Kripa, I totally related to some of the stuff that you wrote about going back to India. And I think that one of the things for those of us who are international adoptees is one piece of the journey that some people did talk about, and you especially talked about, was this whole thing of trying to find some way to situate yourself emotionally in your birth country. You know what I mean? And I had an experience somewhat similar to your experience in India. I had an experience like that in Korea in 2006, and what really struck me about your chapter was how it was so similar emotionally, this need to feel some connection to a country that we didn't grow up in and therefore were completely different from. Do you know what I mean? I think that was very profound.
Yeah, that was that part, that one particular piece that you were talking about also experienced was the probably one of the most impactful experiences while in India, trying to figure out how I fit in this place that was once my home.
Great. Anybody else? Sandy's having the greatest night of her life right now.
She's live again.
Yes, she's back from the dead. Uh, Susan, is there anything that you would like to say to close?
I really appreciate the opportunity to write the chapter. It really meant a lot to me, and I think the book is going to mean a lot to a lot of people.
Okay. Astrid?
Well, I would like to thank the two of you, Adam and Kevin, for creating this opportunity. I think that ever since you two have produced this and gotten it, I know it's not on a shelf; it's on a virtual shelf right now, but. I just think that there's so many other topics and so many other conversations that need to be happening, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. And having people, leaders like the two of you, helping to make things like this happen is exactly what the community needs in order for all of us to have a voice. And so you two are amazing, and thank you so much for offering and leading this.
No, thank you. Sandy, now that you're back.
I almost like that avatar better. I could put a little feather in it. This is just everything everyone said about the two of you. That's what I agree. Just amazing. And what I would like to see, and I'm going to plug it till you guys do it, is adoptees as partners. One of the things I've noticed I've been doing an adoptee support group for Native since 2004, and whenever our partners come, or when our partners relay messages about being married to an adoptee, they're so similar, and there's so many things that we do that we don't even talk about. Joanne and I, or actually over the last week, have exchanged stories, and they're so similar. And when in our group, I bring people that our reactions to the things that we have learned to do to survive are related to those we love, and how we negotiate that, share how to negotiate that would really be helpful. I think we all would be surprised if we wrote our respective chapters on this, with the similarities and I think it'd be amazing.
Mm-hmm. And Susan, you really talked a lot about that.
I did. Yes, I did. I think it would be a wonderful book and anthology. I think you'd see a lot of commonality.
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating because I agree completely with Sandy and Susan. It's most of us met our life partners before we became intensely involved in our journeys, although not all. And so then it's fascinating because the life partner kind of gets dragged along, as it were, and it's a journey that they didn't necessarily choose. So it becomes very complicated and fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, one of the blog pieces when I was writing my Carlos Monkey blog, one of the most read or most commented blog posts was called "Being Married to Harlow's Monkey," And I've had so many people mention that, and people that didn't want to even make a comment on the blog but emailed me privately. And I had partners of adoptees email me about that article or that blog post. So it definitely resonates, I think, for a lot of people, for a lot of adoptees, and for the people that they're partnering with.
Well, since we're working on 4 other books, we might as well just put a 5th.
What's one more?
What's one more?
You can do it. You got the energy.
Yeah. Jiran, is there anything else that you want to end just to like close?
No, just I appreciate the opportunity to do this. I've been thinking about this for a really long time, this topic. So, like I said, I've written about it on my blog. And so I was just glad to see this happen. And all the chapters are amazing. I'm going to echo what Mark said. Sandy's piece, I think, was probably the one that knocked me off my boots the most. But they were all excellent, and I think there was something about every chapter that resonated with my experience too. So just encourage people to buy the book. I think it should be required reading for all adoptive parents and for adoption social workers. Again, I'm really all about making adoption social workers do their due diligence so that they know that when they're placing these children in these homes that there is the lifelong impact.
And if I could just add, Jayron, I think it should be required reading for prospective adoptive parents because
yes, I agree.
Yeah, I've spoken on panels in classes for prospective parents, and obviously there's a fine line. You don't want to completely freak them out that they run out of the room screaming, but I think if more prospective parents had even a tiny inkling of the journey that they're about to get on, it would be a better journey for them and their children.
I always say, Mark, better they run out on me than run out on their kids in 20 years.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Kripa, you have the last word. You have anything?
Well, I think this was an amazing experience.
Could you get a little bit closer? Sorry.
And looking at each of you, and knowing each of your stories, having met some of you already, and I'm looking forward to meeting those I haven't met before. But this book really, I think, gives you an opportunity to reflect not only on your own journey, but have some of those conversations with people in our lives, whether it's our partners, our children, as they get older and can utilize this book as a resource. Our parents, I think it just opens the door for us to have those conversations. And so I encourage people to read the book and to share it with others.
Very cool. All right, Adam, you have the last word.
I think I'd just like to say thank you to all of you for being able to participate in the roundtable and taking the time out to do that. And at the same time, being able to contribute to an anthology. Without you putting down your narratives and doing it in such, I think, a personal and intimate way, that's what makes this book. I mean, it couldn't have been done without each of you. And I know that just reading all of your chapters, I learned something new about myself and about parenting, about the adoptee journey, and it's a pleasure to read, and it's an honor to be able to help put out the book. And I really do hope that prospective parents who are adoptees, prospective adoptive parents, social workers, as many people that can really do pick up the book and read it, because there's so much information and there's so many great things to learn about from each and every one of you. So thank you again for participating in the roundtable, and thank you again for being able to be a part of this book.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, everyone, thank you again, and have a good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 See you.